Eritrea's foreign minister has paid an historic visit to the Horn of Africa nation just days after the two countries agreed to end years of tension. The delegation is expected to remain in Mogadishu as the two countries strategize on ways to upgrade their diplomatic missions in each other's capitals. From Mogadishu, here's CGTN's Abdulaziz Billow with more.
The visit by Eritrea's Foreign Minister Osman Saleh to Mogadishu comes days after Somalia and Eritrea agreed to resume diplomatic ties, ending years of animosity between the two former rivals. The delegation also included Yemane Gebreab, a senior advisor to President Isaias Afwerki of Eritrea, that also met with the country's president and prime minister for bilateral talks that focused on regional cooperation, stability and economic progress in the region.
The delegation from Eritrea is here in Mogadishu to strengthen diplomatic relations and a sign of goodwill from Asmara after the recent visit of the Somali president to Eritrea.
In July, President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo visited Asmara, becoming the first ever Somali leader to visit the Red Sea nation, turning a new chapter in relations between the two countries that haven't had any diplomatic ties for more than 15 years. And in July, Ethiopia and Eritrea signed a peace deal, ending years of conflict over border disputes. Mogadishu and Addis Ababa are now lobbying for the lifting of all economic sanctions against Asmara imposed over Eritrea's alleged support to armed groups in the region, including Al-Shabaab, the deadliest militant group here in the African continent that stands accused of killing thousands of civilians in Somalia and beyond. However, experts have welcomed the normalization of ties between former rivals in the Horn of Africa, arguing that it now sets the pace for an improvement in regional economy with the potential of turning the Horn of Africa, with access to both the Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, into a major regional hub. Abdulaziz, Billow, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, for more on improved relations between Eritrea and its Horn of Africa neighbors, we're joined in studio now by Dr. Francis Onditi from the School of International Relations and Diplomacy at Riara University. Doctor, always a pleasure to have you with us. Of course, just over the past month or so, we've seen a flurry of diplomatic activity surrounding Eritrea. Let's look specifically at Somalia and Eritrea. What's the importance of re-energizing ties, reconnecting between these two countries?
Yeah, it's a great thing because this is a very typical, what you could call, ending the proxy war that has existed for many years between Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia. You remember in the past we've had some countries, Eritrea, being accused of supporting militia against the weak government of Somalia. So these ties that have been strengthened in the recent past between Eritrea and Somalia, having the president of Somalia going to Asmara and having the prime minister going in the other side, it is a sign of what we could call, solutions from home. The Horn of Africa for many years has been suffering conflict, protracted conflict, some of it proxy. But now we are likely to see a region that is coherent in terms of peace and security strategy.
And as you say, the visit, of course, by Somalia's Prime Minister to Eritrea, this visit that we're seeing now, certainly a sign of goodwill between the leadership. But is that enough? Are there enough guarantees from Eritrea's side that they've really turned over a new leaf and are willing to work as partners with their fellow Horn of Africa neighbors?
As I said earlier, this is a typology of solutions, originating from home. It's not imposed. It's not what we used to call the neoliberal, kind of peace. This is exactly the leaders or the people of the two countries in the Horn of Africa agreeing that they can actually foster peace. And that means that the basis of the peace agreement, or rather relation that is coming, is basically emerging from the leaders themselves, and we are also likely to see other aspects of relation getting into play. For example, the trade between Somalia and Eritrea and in the Horn of Africa is likely to be boosted. And those are things which continues to strengthen the relation and also peace that these people, or rather the Horn of Africa, has been longing for a long time.
And where does Djibouti fit into all of this at this stage? There's been tensions there, of course, between Djibouti and Eritrea. Tell us more about that and what it might take to resolve some of those concerns.
Now, Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia are all members of IGAD. IGAD being a regional mechanism, it's an important thing because Djibouti will have to toe the line. In the instances where, for example, Djibouti is not in a position to support the relation, then we've got very clear legislative and also policy mechanisms within the IGAD to enforce that law or to enforce the peace. So there is all confidence, and in any case, the spoiler in the Horn of Africa has always been Eritrea, has not been Djibouti as such. So Eritrea coming on board and agreeing that they can work with the other members of IGAD, I think it's a great thing that other Africans can also copy, they can duplicate, or rather they can replicate back home for there to be peace across the continent.
And what about the question of sanctions? Of course, Eritrea is still under United Nations sanctions. Is there enough evidence at this stage to support the lifting of those sanctions?
Of course, we know that sanctions, the United Nations put sanctions within the law. You know, Chapter 7, particularly Article 41, and gives the UN the mandate to put sanctions. But at the same time, there are conditions that are set. If thresholds are met within which the UN can review the sanctions, why not? Especially the economic sanctions, the embargoes against the leaders, because that alone will also propel the peace. However, there are also other aspects of the sanctions. For example, the sale of arms, that the UN may not release immediately because the area is not pacified completely. So, but in terms of economic, the trade, the exchange, the leaders being allowed to travel all over, I think that one is something the UN will have to do immediately so that they have a roadmap through which they can release the countries to be members of the United Nations proper, and also to trade, to encourage trade between themselves.
Indeed. And finally, very quickly, of course, with all of these latest developments surrounding Eritrea, people are talking about a new dawn, not only for the country, but indeed the whole region. What does that mean for the geopolitics of the region? I mean, what kind of changes might we expect when we see restored relations between Ethiopia and Eritrea? Might that hurt, for instance, Kenya's plans for a pipeline and a railway through Ethiopia?
We know that Ethiopia is leading, especially when it comes to the energy, the multi-trillion energy plant that is being done in southern part of of Ethiopia. It's great for the region. Now, this might, the relation between Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia, what you could call the triangle, can have negative implications in terms of the prospect for Kenya, for example, in terms of the road network, the railway network that have been laid down from Lamu all the way to southern part of Ethiopia to the Indian Ocean. However, that will be that can be sufficed, or rather it can be pacified by other development initiatives like the energy plant in Ethiopia, but also the road that is being constructed from Addis Ababa to Asmara that will also connect it to Djibouti. So there is no doubt that even though some countries might lose in this triangle, the ultimate goal is actually to strengthen the economic pillars of the IGAD members, and then eventually you've got peace. You've got peace in Somali borders, you've got peace in Kenya, you've got peace in the border between Eritrea and Ethiopia. And therefore, ultimately, it brings what we call the liberal peace to the members of the Horn of Africa.
So while individual countries may lose out, overall the region stands to gain.
Yeah, but the region, they should focus on the regional gains, economic and political gains.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that analysis, Dr. Francis Onditi, live with us here in our Nairobi studio.